Welcome to Lesson 1 of Module 3. Today we're going to look at network security, where we will be highlighting ways enterprise could mitigate threats on their network. The objectives for today's lesson will be to unpack the concept of network security, to highlight some security that could be implemented in the OSI model, examine different types of network security, and introduce network security controls for businesses. And if that's not enough, we will include a demonstration showing you how to navigate within a Linux distribution. In our previous modules, we've been focusing on different attacks on a network or system. But in this module, we'll be looking at preventative measures that help mitigate attacks on a system. Network security is a term to describe the protection of different end devices in a network in order to secure the integrity and confidentiality of data within the network. This protection includes both software and hardware components in the network, where configuration or set commands are executed to put in place a form of defense to different varieties of threats and attacks from intruders into the network or system. In big organizations, very high security standards have to be set because technology is constantly improving, and threat actors are continually finding new ways to breach security measures. Network security integrates the different components that host the main layers of security. These layers help to implement different QoS policies, access control, and other processes to build up a strong defense to threat actors who are lurking to exploit vulnerabilities on the network. In a modern architecture, the network security is complex, using a variety of management tools and applications to address various potential threats and exploits. Network security comprises of three main areas: physical network security, technical network security, and administrative network security. So let's briefly examine each area. Physical network security refers to the physical measures implemented to avoid unauthorized access to the organization resources or physical assets. These involve the isolation of end devices such as routers, switches under locks, or some sort of biometric authentication before being able to access the organization's assets. Did you know when applying physical network security to an end device, the device must be kept in a well-ventilated area to avoid high temperatures? Obviously, the bigger your computer, the more heat they will generate. So having good ventilation to keep the inner mechanics cool is crucial. Technical network security focuses more on the technical structure of how data flows through the network, and also on procedures and processes. This involves the establishing of incident response processes, management processes, and sometimes involves security awareness training for employees. Administrative network security focuses on the administrative or supervisory controls to oversee policies, processes, and services. Examples include user authentication, access controls, and firewalls. Let's examine security that could be implemented on the layers of the OSI model by walking through this table. Remember, you can snap and save this to look at later. Network security is always a high priority for any organization. Most businesses cannot withstand an attack during productive hours, as this will greatly reduce the ability for the business to carry out day-to-day operations. Most businesses tend to leverage protection from big cybersecurity companies like Forcepoint, Cisco, Fortinet, Splunk, IBM, Checkpoint, and Proofpoint to manage their network effectively. Basically, they pay simply by using endpoint applications that run on the entire network across the organization. During Module 3, we will be going through various controls that can be put in place to secure an enterprise. But for now, we will just introduce you to them. Paid-for services and controls include the following: virtual private networks, network segmentation, network access control, antivirus and anti-malware software, and firewall protection. It's that time again. Today, we will be demonstrating how to navigate within a Linux distribution. A Linux distribution is a very stable operating system, less vulnerable to computer malware because of the administrative control, because permission has to be manually given to access resources on the machine. It's time to get familiar with CLI, Command Line Interface on Linux. We are now going to dive into a demonstration to show you some basic commands that work on the command line interface in a Linux distribution. For this demo, we will be going to the Linux distribution. So we'll be talking more about Linux and showing commands we can actually use while we're on our Linux terminal. Okay, so what exactly is Linux? Linux is basically an operating system created in 1991, and it's an open source system, and it is widely used in the Security Operations Center because it has a very powerful CLI, which is our command line interface. And it is very useful and very good for security and configuration of network communication. All right, so at the moment, I'm going to jump into my Linux machine. And you can see it's open. And I have my terminal open. But I would just simply close this. And where we have the menu, we could click on this and on the search field. There, I simply type in terminal, and it pops up my terminal application. So the first command I would want to introduce you to is the man command. So this command is basically the command for the manual command line interface on the Linux distribution. Simply put in the man command and enter, and that should show you the whole menu for the command line interface. Okay, and after going through all of this, it's quite a little bit lengthy to get really familiar with the command line interface. But for this demo, we're going to show you some commands that you could use on a day-to-day basis on the Linux distribution. Okay, so we're simply going to use Q to quit. And the next command I would be showing you is the command for copying data. So on the terminal, I put in the command man space CP. And you can see this is a command used to copy a directory on a Linux distribution. And I can quit. So now I know that I can copy and paste text from one directory to another. Right now, I just want to clear the screen and use this command to create a directory by simply typing in the following words: mkdir, and then typing in the file name we want to create in this case. I want to create file-type1txt. And enter. So the MK basically makes the directory for us and saves it as the file name. If I want to make multiple directories, all I have to do is just simply use the arrow, and I can edit the file name. So I can put 2 and use the up arrow key. And you can actually go again and change this to 3 and 4. At the moment, I'm just going to create 4 directories. So how do I see my current directory? To see this, I use the command clear to clear the screen, and then you type the command pwd. And that shows us the current directory we're actually on while on the terminal. So at the moment, we're currently on the home territory. And we're in a subdirectory called the Ubuntu. So if we want to list the files on that current directory, you're going to use the command ls-l. And that lists all the files we have on the current directory. If you notice, we created 4 files earlier. File type 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now you see, these are all the files we have on this current directory on the Ubuntu. But we can also change directory by using the cd-. And that is going to take us to our home directory. Now we can use the ls command to see what files we have within the home directory. And that just shows us the Ubuntu directory. Now we can go back again to the Ubuntu directory by simply using the cd command and enter. And that takes us to the previous directory we were in. So if we use the ls command again, we can see our music file and everything else within the directory. So the other commands I actually want to show you are network commands such as netstat. These commands show all the listening and running processes on the Linux operating system. So simply typing in netstat-all shows us all the running processes we have within this operating system. We can actually just scroll through. And if we do scroll up, we can see on our system we are running SSH, and we have our telnet running as well. And this shows us all the ports listening for instruction / information. And these are all the paths to the ports. So in a case where you need to verify the particular ports or sessions running, you can just verify that by simply running the netstat command. And you can see what potential ports are listening and what is running on the Linux operating system. So the next command I'm going to show you is a command to actually remove a directory. Previously, we actually saw how to create a new directory by using the mkdir directory and file name. Now this time, we're going to remove this directory from our folder by simply using the rmdir file-type3.txt. Still keeping the other format of the command, and simply typing in enter. So we actually deleted that file from the system, and we can verify that by simply running the ls command again, and we could notice the file should be missing from this directory. Why? Because we actually just deleted it. So in other moments, you can actually see the file space type 3 is actually going forward. Now, the next command I'm going to be showing you is the command touch to create an empty file. So I will just quickly clear my screen again. Type in the command touch and file name, 5 space .txt. Now the touch command just creates a file for us. Now, if you remember previously, we created a directory. Now this is just going to create a file for us. So if we do want to create multiple files, we could do exactly the same thing like the previous one. So we can do file type 6.txt. And we can verify that by using the ls command that we just created. Okay, so by creating the command, we are now able to make a new territory. So how do we create a text file? So let's imagine you actually want to create a text for me to actually open up. Opening up the text editor. So how do you create a text file? There are actually a couple of ways you can do this. You can either create one using the equipment, or you can easily just use the cut command. So first of all, I'll show you the cat command. I'm just going to clear my screen and simply type in the command cat. And then using the Richardson's symbol. And then file type. .txt. So it gives me the option to actually type in the text I want within the file. I can see this is just the test. So if you do want to verify to see if you actually created a file or not, you can just look within the file. Okay, next we seem to be using the command cat. And that actually shows us the text within the file. Okay, we are on the date, and that just shows us the date that we can run on the calendar. By using this, it shows us the calendar of the day. And we can actually do a lot of things like showing the time. You can also do things like using the zip cuts to compress the folder. So let's imagine I have this file, and I need to compress this file to become really small. So how do I go about doing that? I could simply just use the zcats command and put in the file name and pressing enter. Well, in this case, it's actually going to be ignored because there is literally no data on the file. Okay, so the next command I'm going to show you is the df command. And this is used to display the size of the operating system. So just like you have on Windows where you could show the total size left on the hard disk, you can do the same on the latest Linux distribution as well. Okay, so we're going to start by using the clear command and enter, and then typing df. And this actually shows us the disk space of the Linux system. And we can also see the partitions that we have. So we're seeing the partitions that we have created for the Linux. And you can see the size, and you can see the block being used, and you can see the file name. Okay, another command we can use for forensics and for the Linux distribution. I'm actually just going to clear this again. The next command is the mount command. Now we are using this to verify if we actually have connected devices on our network. So if we had an external USB or an external storage device connected to the computer, we can verify if that was being connected by simply running the mount command. Now, I know at the moment it looks unorganized, but that's because this partition is created just to support a little bit of things. So it looks really unorganized, but in a very organized computer where you have more files and structures of data, you would easily spot out the root folder. And we can see in this case, this is actually one of it. And this is the order. So we can see this is the partition we created for the virtual box. And this is the partition running on our virtual box. Okay, so another command we can use is the assets command. Now, this command can help us to stop running processes. So it helps to stop processes running on the terminal. So if you had processes running on the operating system, like in the background, you can actually just use the assets command. So simply typing IPA and enter. Now, this command will show you the version of the IP config that you have on the computer. So if you actually look closely, you can see I have two. And the first one basically is my lookback, and it shows me my lookback interface. So another one you can use is the if config to look up our interface running on the computer. And we can actually use the IW config as well. And that shows us the interface running on the computer with lesser details. So in this case, there is no wireless station, which means we are running on an internet connection. So we can actually also check the disk size on the Linux machine by using the du command. Now, the du command will show the space being used and available on the files on the Linux distribution. So we can run the command du, and it'll show us the space details for each individual file. And if we want to know exactly how much space we have in summary, we can run the du space hs. And that simply just checks the sizes and prints the results in a human-readable manner. And it also summarizes the information. So you can see the figure we have in here is exactly the same as what we had before. But in this case, we have a summarized number. Okay, so another useful command is the W. Now, the W actually shows the user who's logged in on the computer. So we can verify who was logged in, how long they've been on the machine, and how long it has been idle. So let's say if they were idle and the machine hasn't been used for quite a while, we can see that value in here. And we can also see the user who logged into the machine. So in this case, we just have one user for the machine. But in a case where we have multiple users, we should be able to see different names of the people who logged in on the machine. So another useful command we can go through again is the free command. So we type in free space h, and basically the free command shows us the content of the RAM. And you can see the total memory being used on the RAM. And you can also see how much memory is shared. And we can also see the cache value. And you can see how much memory has been used for the cache and the buffer. So the buffer will be the short-term memory being used mostly for videos. And you can actually save a video temporarily to the memory rather than going directly to the host. So you could just keep getting the CSV memory from the cache. Okay, so there are some basic few commands. Now, the next command I want to show you is the command called the nano. So within the Linux distribution, we have an inline and we have a time in a text editor. So you don't have to always go to your GUI to actually open a text editor. Right from the command line, you can open a text editor right in the Linux distribution. So using the nano and putting in the file name you want to open. So in this case, I want to open up a new file and I want to edit it in my text editor. So I simply put in file 9 dot and I put in the extension of the file. So in this case, the extension was always going to be txt. But if it's a script, it's going to be an sh. And if it's a Python script, it's going to be a pi. I'm actually just opening up a text file. So it's going to be txt, and I press enter. Now you would notice you have more commands in here. Now you don't have to memorize all of this. You could just get to the point where you can see the text editor on the terminal. Or what you have to do is simply put in this command each time you need to do something. So when you see this arrow, it simply represents the control on the keyboard. So in this case, I have a text in here, and I just say this is a text for Shaw. So if you actually want to exit this, you just use the Control X to write out and to save. Now, to read a file is when you use the control arrow. And when you want to replace something, you use the control \. And if you got a text, you simply use the control key to pass the text. So in this case, I'm just going to save this file. And how do I save it? By simply using the control O. And the file has been saved. And it asks me, find name to write the file. And I simply just put in yes, because I don't want to change it. So now I have created this file, and I could exit by simply pressing Control X. And if I want to verify that I created this text file with a nano command, I could simply use the cat command. And I put in cat file 9 and .txt. And that just shows me exactly what is embedded within the text file. So that was just for creating a text file. How do I create a batch script? Now for the batch scripts, we're going to use a nano command and simply type in the nano, and we type in the name of the script. So in this case, you can see it's my first .sh, which represents my first .scripts, and enter. Now, we won't actually put this command first before we start writing out a script. And the reason for this is it is actually referred to as a shebang. Now, this just basically means that this script is an executable script. So always make sure you have first the heading of the script. And we could simply run and then actually go into deep. So it would just make it easy using the echo. And just typing notes. You agree and simply finish using the control O to save and enter. And then using the control X to close. Now, if we want to run the exact same script, I would have a bit of an error. So simply put in the dot and / in the file name .script .sh. Now you notice we have permission denied. Now the reason for this is because we actually haven't specified what permissions the script should have on our system. So the easiest way you could do this is by using the crow mode. And you can also use the crow mode plus. And in this case, we want this script to be an executable script. So we need to close X in the file name, which is my first .sh, and enter. So now if I want to run the script again, it should launch. Now you can see the difference between the first time and the second time. If you notice, we actually had a little bit of errors because we didn't configure our scripts properly. So we're using Control O and enter. And Control X. And if I run again, it just gives me an output. Now, the reason we had the errors previously is because we left the syntax in there, which is the FI. But that will be creating a proper script. In this case, it's just a script to print out results. Now, the second way of actually putting in the permission, we can still use the crow mode. We're using the 777 and the file name. So it's 777 and the file name, which is, of course, myfirst.sh. And this would work exactly the same. Now, the reason it would work is because this command is the same as the previous command. The numbers actually have a meaning on the terminal. Basically, 7 means the highest privilege. It means the highest privilege you can give to a file or folder or any form of file on the Linux system. So, 7 basically means the file has the permission to read and be written and also to be executed. So, you have to be very careful what numbers you actually fix into this. You can either choose to use the 777, or you can choose to use the 765. Now, the 6 basically means the user has the ability to only read and write on the Linux system. And the 5 just basically means the same as well. But if I was to have a 4, the 4 means that file has only the permission to be read on the system. But in this case, I want to give the permission to be able to read and write because the file is actually an executable file. So we leave it on 777. And we specify the file name. And we specify the extension of the file. And simply enter. And that does exactly the same thing as the previous command while using the crow mode. So we can still execute this by using the syntax / and the file name.sh and enter. And it gives us an output. And basically this wraps up the whole video for Linux. And in the next demo, we will be going through the domains of VPN on the Linux distribution, and we'll be analyzing the traffic we get from the VPN to identify the reason why VPN connections are actually being used in a secure environment. And that is it for today's demo.